we start with a video real quick just to get in the... So the video is basically made to get into the understanding of what's really possible. And so if you could start getting out of the brains a little bit more into the session, then also the session becomes more of a flow and experience. And I think that's quite important. We'll get into the brain again when we walk through the science.
Let's imagine for a few moments what our life would be like if
to feel it. Start retraining your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind, it responds to what it is that you suggest to it. Your subconscious mind rules your life. 96 to 97% of everything that you do is done as a result of your subconscious mind. And when your subconscious mind gets programmed, it goes ahead and responds to whatever it is your conscious mind has placed into it. You are the creator. This is the mystery. This is the great secret known by the seers and prophets and mystics throughout the ages. This is the truth that you can never know intellectually.
Many of you, as I have been, as I am, are where you are in your life based upon what you believe. And it's not just what you think you believe on the surface, it's also your shadow beliefs that are holding you back from moving into the life that you believe you deserve. What I know is if you're not looking at the shadows, if you're not looking at what is subconsciously running through the tape in your mind, telling yourself you're not good enough, you're not worthy enough, you're not smart enough, you're not enough, which is a tape that's playing for a lot of people. If you're not conscious of that, then you end up acting out of that belief system and not out of what you know to be the truest or want to be the truest for yourself.
You are where you are today, in part because of what you've been saying about yourself. Words are like seeds. When you speak something out, you give life to what you're saying. If you continue to say it, eventually that can become a reality. You are planting seeds when you talk. At some point, you're going to eat that fruit. My challenge is make sure you're planting the right kind of seeds. If you want apples, you have to sow apple seeds. If you want oranges, you can't plant cactus seeds, poison ivy seeds, mushroom seeds. You're going to reap fruit from the exact seeds that you've been sowing. In other words, you can't talk negative and expect to live a positive life. You can't talk defeat and expect to have victory. You can't talk lack, not enough, can't afford it, never get ahead, and expect to have abundance. If you have a poor mouth, you're going to have a poor life. And this is great when we're saying things like, I'm blessed, I'm strong, I will accomplish my dreams, I'm coming out of debt. That's not just being positive, you are prophesying victory, prophesying success, prophesying new levels. And your life will move in the direction of your words. But too many people go around prophesying just the opposite. I never get any good breaks. I'll never get back in shape. Business is slow. I'll probably get laid off. Flu season is here. I always get it. They don't realize they are prophesying defeat. It's just like they're calling in bad breaks, mediocrity, lack.
You don't become what you want because so much of wanting is about living in the space of what you don't have. That's why Jim Carrey's story is so powerful, because he started to act as though he already had it. He would go up to Mulholland Drive, he would drive away thinking, I already have those things, I just haven't accessed them as yet. I believe those things are going to come to me and I'm going to act like they are, so I'm going to move forward in my life in order to draw that to myself in such a way that my actions are in alignment with what I say I believe. So if you start to think about that, really, why are you where you are in your life? The choices that you have made have been because of what you believe to be true for yourself.
The time is now. The time is now to express and for people to believe in themselves. The time is now for it to be okay to be great. People in this world shun people for being great, for being a bright color, for standing out. But the time is now to be okay to be the greatest you.
You can talk yourself out of your destiny. Negative words can keep you from becoming who you were created to be. Don't fall into that trap. Quit calling in defeat. Quit talking about how it's not going to happen. You should write down your goals. Write down what you want to see happen in life. Any areas that you're struggling in, where you need to improve, write it down like it's already done. And then every day, declare that decree. Read over it a couple of times out loud. It's not enough to just think it. Something happens when we speak. You have to prophesy your future. Those words will get down on the inside of you. They'll not only change your outlook, but they will change who you are. Your words will become your reality.
So now we remembered again that most of what we do, we're actually not even conscious of. So what we vibrate, we call into our lives. It's very important to understand that's how this reality actually works. If I vibrate in fear and anger and guilt and shame, then that's what I'm calling into my life. That's what I have in my life, and that's how my life will look like. If I can vibrate in unconditional love and happiness, just higher levels of consciousness, then exactly that is what I'm calling into my life. That's one important thing to understand. The other important thing to understand is that we think of ourselves as solid, right? Like this. We are actually over 99% space. Also, just on a molecular weight level, we're over 99% water. I think most people know that, but it's not really that we're driving a car and then we realize we're over 99% water, right? That's really not the case, but that's what we are. Just don't realize that in our daily lives often. But if we're energy and frequency to begin with, obviously, why would we only take care of the physical? That's why I love that people like Dave and others have started a few years ago to really expand the biohacking into also bioenergy hacking, so that people can start realizing and taking care of that biofield. Because if we don't bring our biofield in balance, we can take as many supplements as we want, then we're not going to heal the whole system that we are. So this picture is not advertising anything. It's literally just because I've been asked in the past, okay, so how does this block technology actually look like? This is how it looks like. Now you've seen it. I don't really want to talk a lot about the products. I want to talk about the science and what has been found. So, which is quite fascinating. So Lila Quantum Tech was able to develop a technology that can imprint pure natural quantum energy into any object. And what is quantum energy actually, or how do we define it? It actually has nothing to do with quantum mechanics. It actually works with the real deal. So that's the same energy we have in each of our cells. Call it source energy. Call it quantum energy. And it's the energy behind the matter. When I say we're over 99% space, it's not that we're over 99% empty space. It's filled. Call it consciousness, call it quantum energy. Again, there's different words for the same thing, but it is energy. And that's where it differs from the view of quantum mechanics that would say the lowest possible thing is always a particle. It's not really true. So I think since about 4 years, there have been over 60 by now different studies, over 48 or 49 of those placebo-controlled, done by various different labs, institutes, and doctors' offices all over the world, really stress testing this technology and finding out new things by the day. Quite fascinating is one fact that a few times already we bumped into researchers, or the latest story actually was with the University of Tulsa. There's one of the top experts in the US, Dr. Robert Schief. He's an associate professor at the University of Tulsa, who has been looking since decades at human cells and how to improve mitochondria function, ATP production, what inhibits it, what improves it, what happens with wound healing of human cells. And we were introduced to him and we're told, well, he can run these studies. And then we got on the phone with him and I asked him, could you run an ATP production study with our technology? And he said, yeah, sure. What type of technology? So I explained it to him and he said, well, yeah, that's not going to work. But I'm happy to do it. And I said, sure, okay, let's do it. So he proved himself wrong in the first study. And it was very clear, it was already statistically significant. And then he repeated it one more time just to get his one part on board that wasn't on board yet, even though I did see the results. Same results happened. And then he did it a third time because he said, before I publish it, I need to cover my butt. Because if you come out with something that goes against something that mainstream science thinks it's not possible, right? But it is possible. Then you need to cover your butt. So you did it a third time, and the same results happened. We will get into the results in a little bit. So the Base Institute, by the way, just real quick, is the largest independent institute in Europe that tests for biosystem analysis and biofeedback. But they also do live blood analysis studies. So where you take blood basically, and under a dark field microscope, you can see the red blood cells, the white blood cells, parasitic load in the blood, and things like that in an illuminated fashion. And it's the best tool that exists all over the world to analyze the blood. Not to check on vitamin levels. That you would use a different tool for that. That's then another different tool. But to actually see what is going on with your blood cells, that is the tool to use. And with this baseline method that they're also using, works a lot with cellular voltage, for example, to check each and every organ, what is the health of the organ, etc. They tested all kinds of different stuff. EMF neutralization and harmonization studies, I think multiple of those, just regular impact on the physical body, improvement in the blood, improvement in food and water. They tested toxic substances, for example, herbicides, fungicides, even things like cesium-137, where the negative effects, or harmful effects, I should say, on the human body was neutralized with the technology. Things like that they tested, and I think they did also some animal studies with the technology, and one of the latest studies they did, we'll get into here, that's the electric car study. Because people, or the people that have heard about the technology, they hear, well, one thing it does, it harmonizes EMF, and what does that mean? It means it neutralizes, in this case actually, some people may claim it does and it doesn't, but in our case, it really neutralizes 100% of the negative effects of EMF on the human body that can be measured through the blood, heart rate variability, and whatever other method. But people were wondering what's going on with these electric cars, because people have found that EMF and exposure in electric cars is way higher than in usual cars. And am I still safe using your technology there, or should I just never even step into an electric car? So they tested the strongest electric car on the market in Europe. I can't say the brand. And the results were absolutely significant. And by the way, so they're extremely thorough. So when they do a test or a study, it's not that they just go in and try to be done quickly. They actually go really deep. And that's what they did in this study too, because they didn't just test you being in an electric car and then get out. No, they also tested what happens if you drive for an hour. Because if you use an EMF meter, you can test that, right? So the longer you drive, the higher the exposure. It's crazy. It's probably because just everything is heating up. And then also the exposure is even higher if you're on the phone while you're driving. And then if you have one or two passengers that are also on their phones and you're driving, then it's just literally crazy because it just amplifies each other. And the worst scenario is if you charge an electric car. So even though our technology was able to also neutralize that with 100%, I still don't recommend anyone staying in an electric car if you charge it. So this is just a snapshot, and this is not like a best case, for presentation purposes that we picked. This is absolute average here, what was tested. Before test, you see the green is actually how it's supposed to be. That's the organ functions on average. Then you are in an electric car, start driving, and then everything turns into blue, which is actually a deregulation. And the red is actually, that's so quick deregulation, that's pathological. I don't even know if that's the right word, but I think I'm from Germany originally. So I think you understand what I mean. And then you introduce our technology, even though the actual car driving is still going on, and then suddenly everything is regulated. That's the green. And just so you can see here, they go really granular. So they tested the lung, the skin, the large intestines, the connective tissue, the stomach, etc. Right? You can see that here. And then you see with the technology, it was all neutralized. You know, that's just a long-term study of the so-called heel capsule. I just brought that up real quick because a lot of people wear this heel capsule, like you.
Like me.
Which block did they test?
They tested different blocks. So, and from that standpoint, actually, any block does the same thing. We have, you know, I really didn't want to talk too much about the product, so that we can rather do at the booth or maybe in the also Q&A. Just real quick, the quantum block, that's the weakest block we have. That has specific use cases for copying frequencies and so on. It would still be great for EMF, but I rather recommend any of the other ones. But all of them can take care of it, so that's not a problem. So the ATP production study, that is the one I mentioned where Dr. Robert Schief went in and had a control group with millions of cells and treated group with millions of cells. And it was found that the technology was able to increase ATP production by 20 to 29%. Now I reference Dave Asprey, who had texted after these results, after the study was repeated 3 times, always the same results, each of them statistically significant. He said, that's absolutely incredible. That's so amazing because you can do these 10, 11 things, and he had written a book about ATP production. You know, if you take this and this and this and your NAD shots, then you maybe raise your ATP production by 20%. Maybe you can get it to 25%, but that you can do it basically with the press of a button, completely non-invasive in this way is fascinating. So I assume everyone here knows what ATP production is, since it's a biohacking conference. If someone doesn't know what it is, it's really, I mean, I didn't know it like years ago, so it's not a bad thing. Just let me know or later ask, but it's the currency of our cells, right? It's literally the energy production of our cells. So if we don't have that, we're dead. That's how important it is. And yeah, you know, that happened constantly over the time measured. So wound healing was then the next study. So Dr. Robert Schief, we told him then, okay, well, ATP production, excellent, awesome. We now know this, but what about cell recovery? Because my thought was, well, if it boosts ATP production, and we had seen this and a lot of anecdotal evidence ourselves in the family, but also with a lot of customers that reported that they could heal faster. Now, I'm not supposed to say the word heal, but they said heal. So we were like, okay, let's call it recovery. Can that be tested? And he said, yes, that can be tested, no problem. The way they do it is they have a control group, again, with millions or tens of millions of cells, and they scratch them with a laser. And then they have a treated group, also same thing, stretched with a laser, and it's blinded, completely double blind, so that even the professor doesn't know which are now the treated cells, and then it's revealed when it's over. And very clearly it was shown, I think a 46.5% to 100% acceleration in wound healing of actual human cells. So at that point, he started teaching that to his students. It was like, okay, I mean, I see this here. There's more possible than we thought it was, right? So what does that mean even? And it's, you know, for him, it was shocking in a very positive way. And so that wound healing study was done 5 times, by the way. So 5 times. And the 100% was the best case scenario, and the 46.5% acceleration was the worst case scenario. This is just a pilot study here that was recently completed by Glycinage. That's also a company that has a booth here. They test the biological age. We're just focused on that. And we wanted to find out, we're still in the process actually of doing that because it was just a small pilot study to see, you know, what happens with biological age. And, initially the study is not over. There were some positive results showing a decrease in biological age and actually in chronic inflammation here. But I think we're right now increasing it to a size of 12 test persons, and then, once that is done, it will be increased further. That's usually how you start. But biological age is definitely something we like to look at, because if we can say, it improves this, and that, it should have definitely an impact on longevity. And the way to test it would be the biological age. So the EGIV Institute in Europe is the largest EMF testing and research institute in Europe, and they tested and certified all of our products. We have some clothing products that block EMF, so they test for that. They had a large HRV study with the so-called HEAL capsule, showed an improvement in 100% of the cases, and a neutralization of the harmful EMF effects. I want to get into the live blood analysis studies, because I really like what I can show here, first of all, because it's so visual. And that was a similar story. So Dr. Beverly Rubik in the US is probably, definitely in the US, the number one researcher in regards to live blood analysis. UC Berkeley, she's been published all over the place. She's been doing it since decades. She had voiced concerns about the high EMF exposure, and she has analyzed the blood of humans since, I think, 3 decades. And she got really concerned because each year she runs these studies, she sees that the baseline blood of people on average gets worse and worse. And she can only point it back to EMF, because she has also done a lot of testing with Wi-Fi free environments and all of that. So someone sent me a video of hers where she voices these concerns a few years ago and said, you need to reach out to her and tell you that you have the solution for this. So I did. And then she said, well, it looks intriguing. And we had at that point already done some before and after testing. So I showed her also those pictures. She said, looks all great, but I still don't believe it. I don't. I said, okay, so why? What would happen? Well, what would need to happen so that you also see this? And she said, well, it needs to be a gold standard study. You've done some before and after testing, that's great, but it needs to be sham controlled, it needs to be blinded and repeated, right? So that you rule out all the placebo effects that may be there, right? I said, okay, so how do we do this? Well, I know how to do this. This is what I've been doing since decades. So long story short, she started the first study with 4 test persons, and I said, 4 test persons, are you kidding me? I mean, no one is going to believe me that it works if we just do 4 test persons, right? That's too small. She said, no, it's not too small. I don't want to blow your budget. And I operate under the assumption it doesn't work. But if it works, I will see it in this study. And then we'll just do larger studies right after and take it to statistical significance. Now, after the pilot study, she called me up and said, oh my God, you have the solution. This really works in 100% of the cases. I had no idea. And it actually even helps with this thing, because the blood clotting issue, that's the issue of the current times right now. So what was she able to see? She saw in each of the test persons a significant increase in white blood cell activity and motility. And she saw also a declotting, so reversal of stage 1 and stage 2 of blood clotting within just 10 minutes. So on the left, you see a baseline blood of test person comes in a Wi-Fi free environment, gets tested. Then you turn Wi-Fi on, or she did that. Then you see how the blood clots, and you may have seen these pictures before. If you've never seen live blood analysis pictures before, welcome. And now you see that, but you probably have already a feeling the one in the middle, that's not really how my blood is supposed to look like. So if it looks like that, you're at way higher risk of heart attack, stroke, heart disease, all kinds of stuff. It's just super unhealthy. Now, Wi-Fi stays on and our technology gets introduced. Again, sham controlled, right? So she had a device that was charged and infused with our tech, and the other one looked exactly the same, but it was a sham device. And you see on the right how it looks after just 10 minutes. Complete reversal of the negative effects, and it even looks better than the before test. She then has these categories and shows the different things. Now I jump a little bit ahead because so she's done 5, we have Q&A in the end. So please just remember it for then and then ask the question. So she's done 5 of these studies by now and always the same result. This works in 100% of the cases. It's not random and it's also not marginal. These improvements, that's why I'm showing this graphic. Can you see this here? It is significant. And if you look back, this is significant. It's not just some little improvement. This is absolutely massive. The Besa Institute in Austria has also by now run multiple dark field microscopy studies with the tech. And they actually found additional things because Dr. Rubik didn't look at things like parasitic load. They did though. And they found even a decrease in parasitic load in the blood by up to 80% within just 15 minutes. And now they're currently running the analysis what that was on average, so I can't even tell you. My assumption right now is somewhere between 25 and 80%. So just to show a little bit of the breadth of this, so now the Emoto Institute in Japan, which probably most people have heard of before, Masaru Emoto was the pioneer in the world actually to figure out how you could visualize the health and energetic nature of water. Right? And that you can also impact water with energy. And they found that this technology was able to improve water faster than any other method they'd ever seen and tested before. Which actually, they followed up on that very quickly and asked if they could resell our products in Japan, which they've been doing since 20 months now. And this is the only technology that they actually resell. They've never done that before. It's just energy, can't do anything. Quite fascinating that it actually can. So this was a clinical trial that was done with 42 autistic kids in India. Now, how that came about was through our community because someone who has an autistic kid did some research with his own child and started treating that kid every Monday. And Mondays were usually the worst days for this kid. And he had a team that would evaluate the kid every day throughout the day, in terms of language skills, attention span, all these things. And then suddenly Mondays were the best days. So he reported that. Of course, that's not statistically significant in any way, right? It's somewhat placebo controlled because obviously the kid didn't know. But the head of this clinic in India heard about that and was like, this sounds intriguing. We would like to run a study. And they reached out and said, could we provide the technology for that? I said, yes. Long story short, there were a couple kids off the spectrum after the study. It was a 6-month study. 70% of the kids showed a significant improvement. And on average, 20 basis points were reduced of the ATIC score. The ATIC score is a score that shows where you are on the spectrum, and 20 basis points is quite massive. And now maybe it's time to close the loop also to the beginning where we watched the video, right, which wasn't about science, but it was about the subconscious and about energy. So this technology works on the energy level. It literally interacts with our energy system, and it does that, for example, also with the autistic kids. So autistic kids and autistic people in general, they have an issue with being present in the here and now. They're usually constantly drawn into a different reality, and that's why they're not really present. And that's where most of the issues originate from. Now, if you put them in a field or support them with a field that is you can call it a high consciousness field or high quantum energy field, whatever you want to call it, it literally pulls them into the here and now. And that's why you see those results. And why do you see the blood suddenly improve, or the heart rate variability, or the ATP production? All these things happen because on an energetic level, we're basically supported to get into optimal balance, into optimal form. And so the body starts to react right away and does all these things. But it all starts on the energetic level, on the biofield. How many more minutes do we have? Perfect. Okay, so food sensitivity. Another interesting one. 3 years ago, more or less, at Dave's conference in Orlando, we did a demonstration live on stage. It was actually a bigger room then. There was over 100 people in the room. And we had heard many months before already, multiple times from people that had food sensitivities, that if they charged the foods in the blog, they didn't have an allergic reaction. But the allergy wasn't gone, so if they tested the food without charging, they had the reaction. And then again, they tested it with charging and they didn't have a reaction. So then we demonstrated live on stage. You can actually look it up on our YouTube channel. I think it was like the crab experiment or something like that. So a scientist took crab meat, put it into Todd Shipman's biohacker Todd arm with a derma roller, and it started to be itchy right away, red. He started to get blisters, and people could, of course, come up, like you here in the room, and they looked at it. And then the same crab meat they put into this infinity block for 5 minutes, and then took it out, put it in his other arm, no allergic reaction. Quite a demonstration, so that was quite fascinating. And by now we've done a pilot study also that showed a 50 to, I think, 75% reduction in allergy response across all kinds of different substances, whether it was lactose, gluten, or other substances. That is something where explicitly I'm not yet making a claim though, and I'm also not telling you to try this at home, because allergies is a different and difficult thing, right? Because there's so many different substances and there's also so many different levels of food sensitivity, right? And if someone, has maybe a deadly avocado allergy, I'm definitely not going to be the one telling you go try this. So wait until we have more data, but the initial data is very, very promising. And I can tell you that there's hundreds, if not thousands of people in our community that are using the tech, to charge their bread because they're gluten sensitive. And yeah, it's quite fascinating. So by the way, so here it still says 70 to 90% reduction. There were tests done actually that also showed a 90% reduction in allergy response. But overall, it looked more to be around 50 to 75%. So we have lots of studies ongoing, and we're testing for men's health, for sperm quality and quantity. There's again biological age. There's a animal study, a huge one with live blood analysis currently conducted in Europe by multiple veterinarians. There's a professional athlete study that is about to start very soon. Actually, several professional athletes from all over the world are starting to use this tech to further improve their performance. And yeah, so I hope I had something here that sparked your interest a little bit, and to really also start thinking more about your biofield, about your, not just your physical health. Your physical health obviously is very important, but we need to start realizing that we can really improve our biofield by the way how we vibrate, also the way we think, the way we feel, that we just watch that. And it's not just about just taking supplements. That's all great, but you can do a lot more. So that's my presentation for today, and now we can move into questions and answers.
So in these studies, you mentioned 10 minutes and 15 minutes, like how much is the exposure time, and then is there too much exposure? You have to worry about that?
No, there isn't. Well, there isn't really too much exposure. It's just that in the beginning especially, we tell people if you have a block for the first 2 weeks, drink more water than you usually would, because you can have some detox effects. And if you were to now, for example, first time you're in this field and you put your hands in there for, let's say, half an hour, you probably would feel a little bit overwhelmed because of the energy, because it just could trigger a lot of things. But you notice that, you know, like intuitively you would just then be done with it for the day, but you get used to that energy very, very quickly actually. And the longer you're using it, the longer you can also use it. So, you know, I mean, I could sleep in this thing and it, you know, wouldn't trigger any detox effects. So that's just over time. And maybe I mentioned something about long-term also, and I didn't really put it in the slides because it's a very delicate topic, right? But spike proteins, you know, obviously vax and spike proteins are all very controversial, and you need to be really careful, you know, what you say about these things. But the Base Institute ran a 6-month study, not just like 10 or 15 minutes, but 6 months. And they wanted to see, you know, what happens with the blood, really, if we treat over 6 months. They had a control group with vaccinated and unvaccinated people, and they had a treated group with unvaccinated and vaccinated people. So it was just pretty even. And they found traces of the spike protein in every one of the control group. In every time they took blood, every time. And they're very thorough, so they don't just take blood from like one part of the body, they rotate. They go from literally from everywhere so that they don't miss out on anything. And now, in the treated group, not a single time in one single case they could find any trace of the spike protein. Isn't that quite something? So yeah, so over time actually, you know, it helps you, but at the same time, even though that's hard to understand, but it sort of trains you to also vibrate higher. So let's say you have this for 2-3 weeks, and then you go into town, go do some shopping, you will deal with the EMF exposure in a completely different way than 2-3 weeks before, even though you don't carry this thing around. And it is just because you start to vibrate higher. It's just because it's our nature. You know, it's just we don't really think about it, right? We just think about paying our bills. Or maybe do some biohacking.
Still, Sarah here was asking me,
Yeah.
did you really feel a change? And I'm not associated with the company at all. We just randomly met in the same room. I went crazy and I added all the pellets in here. There are 5 of them, right? And I have an autoimmune condition. And then I went and bought the card sleep and did some glutathione. And I said, I'm going to just be brave. And little did I know, and I've never shared this with you, we have a group. I just started feeling like I was going faster than my body. And I know this is really odd, but I was hitting things. Like I couldn't measure. I'm clumsy by nature, but I became even clumsier. And around this time, 5, 6-ish, I've got to take this up. Because I feel like my body, it's on overdrive. So I take it off, I hang it on my bed, and then I've got my other card to sleep better. But it's almost like a HERS reaction when someone has Lyme disease or some sort of parasite, and I have Lyme, by the way. So I think that part of what I was doing is I was putting my body into overdrive to manifest healing. I'm trying to heal my gut, get some stuff way too fast. So I kind of took some pellets out because biohackers are like that. And thanks to Dave, he said, well, just try it all. So I took it out, but you do feel, you have to be mindful though too. If you've never been mindful of how you feel, one of the things that I believe you say is when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself, how am I feeling? Right? Not just jump and go. And so, yes, I did feel this. I'm not being paid for this. None of this is being paid for. I did feel the difference. There's another colleague of yours, Joe Dispenza. If you really want to sort of a very nice segue, Joe explains this a little bit more in a different way. But it's all about using the power that we've got. We don't use it. And to manifest that, but you've got to start with feeling inside? What am I feeling? So I kind of got tired of bruising myself, so I slowed down and now I feel I'm like getting there in terms of that energy that it gives you. But it could be overwhelming, so you got to slow it down. So it works, but you've got to look for it. You've got to be in tune with what is happening around you.
So you don't want to buy all of our products and wear them all at once, right? So that's I frequently get asked. So you have all these frequency cards. Couldn't you just make a frequency for everything?
Yeah.
Like, and that's not possible. Like, you couldn't also read all books that exist all at the same time. You just can't do that. Well, thank you for the input and the fact that you're wearing the Heal capsule after 5 or 6 years shows quite a bit. So. You start your question because you were the first one that actually wanted to ask the question.
Yeah, I just wonder, in the studies, is it like enough to just have it in the room, or are they being true, like you have to put your hand inside, or?
Great question. So Dr. Rubik, for example, tested it in all kinds of different ways. So for each study, of course, it was always kept the same way. She started off with people just putting the hands inside, and then it moved to just it being in the room. And what we knew already beforehand and what the science basically verified is that if you put your hands or your feet inside, it works even better and even faster. But you just being in the room, frankly, this little thing there covers the whole hotel. It's hard to imagine, but it literally, but the further you go away from it, the weaker the fields. So at some point there's no field anymore, and at some point also it cannot take care of EMF anymore, but it has a quite large radius, so the EMF harmonization at least would happen in about the 300 to 400 meter radius, which is almost 1,200 feet.
How many are in the hotel right now?
How many of these blocks? We don't know, because I'm sure that several people here are traveling with their travel blocks. I know Dave does, and several other people do, so I couldn't even tell you how many we have here. So quite a bit, I assume. We just ourselves have, I think, 4 or 5 here right now.
Can you talk a little bit about the origin story of how this was created?
Yeah, so it came a little bit out of our own story. So my wife at the time, she had been diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease, and we were told she can't do anything about it. You just have to live with this and then die at some point. But that's pretty much what they said, and we didn't accept that. Now, she has her own healing abilities, obviously, but it triggered in me my passion for really biohacking and bioenergy hacking. And I had been going through shamanic healing trainings and learning energy healing techniques since I think the early 2000s, right? So, and I had gotten to know some of the best healers across the world because I always wanted to learn from the best, like not this Reiki dude across the street, which I don't want to discredit any Reiki practitioners. It's a great practice. But I wanted to find the people that can heal a broken arm in a couple of days or something like that, right? Something like very significant. And so then I bumped into a couple of companies that were experimenting with quantum technology, and they worked with the quantum field, but they had just very little quantum energy in it, and just a lot of other stuff like electricity, magnetism, all things that make you feel there's a lot more in it, but there's actually, it's stressful to the human body. And I said, but the idea is amazing. So then this vision came up to create products that can help us 24/7. What Joe Dispenza teaches, or my wife teaches, and others, is to, with your mind, you can literally start healing yourself. You can move things. You can things that are out of balance, you can bring them back into balance. We all can do that, right? But it's practice. If you want to be a Wimbledon champion, you need to pick up a racket and start practicing. Otherwise, you'll never even get to Wimbledon. And that's the same thing. It's like a muscle we've never used, so you get to practice it. With this technology, the beauty is you don't have to meditate 8 hours a day. it works 24/7 just for you and you're not even doing anything. It's still great if you do a little meditation, maybe some yoga, some other mindfulness practices, because that amplifies the work. But yes, through that whole own healing journey, if you will, this came about. Yeah. And we work with, some of these people. I mean, they have literally X-Men type capabilities. And I'm not talking about I can spit fire now or something like that, or jump 100 feet. It's X-Men-like capabilities in terms of viewing frequencies and vibrations on a supragranular level. That cuts probably 10, 20, 30 years of development time out of our production cycle when we develop new products, because we can already just develop it like this and know what happens, and then we can go into scientific testing and not really into trial and error. Yeah, so that's a unique approach to things, for sure. All right, you go first.
So what's the difference between, other than being pulsed, right? So what's the difference between a biocharger, which is basically a pulse, right?
Mm-hmm.
A frequency of EMF, and that?
Completely different, because they work with electricity, and it's literally all in the physical spectrum, right? So it's all like PMF, for example, it's also a pulse, right? It all is a physical frequency. It's all a pulse. The quantum field is literally the most fundamental level of energy that exists, and within the quantum field, all other frequencies exist, whether that is a right frequency, a PMF signal, a vitamin C frequency, right? There's all kinds of different frequencies. They all exist within the quantum field. The quantum field, the quantum energy, is the same energy we have in each of our cells. It's important to understand, like, what we have created is nothing artificial. It's also not that we invented the quantum field, right? Because, I mean, it's always been there and it will always be there. It's just the breakthrough was to find a way in how to harness and concentrate it. And that's basically what we did. So this neutral field just, it doesn't have a specific pulse that may trigger your ear or kill a bacteria or something like that. It just works on your system as a whole. And it also is not, it doesn't interfere with something like a PMF mat. So actually it's quite beneficial. So if you have this and you're on a PMF mat, you see the effects of the PMF mat being greater. So that's, it doesn't interfere negatively. I hope that helps. Maybe I have time for one last question, and then all other questions, find us at the booth today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, we're there. And by the way, there's 20% off. I was told I should say that, 20% off at the conference on everything. Last question, right?
Of the studies that you talked about here, were they all on the block, or were some of them quantum upgraded?
Some of them were also quantum upgrades. I just try to not mention too many quantum upgrade studies, because it was supposed to be rather about Lida Quantum Tech, but also about the HEAL capsule. So the HEAL capsule was also part of some of those studies. The Emoto Institute also tested the water bottle, for example. But most of the studies were done with the blocks, yes. All right, well, thanks so much for your interest, and good conference.